And welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to see so many of your faces and to hear more about your experience as far as crowdfunding and being involved in group economics. My name is Jock Payton. I'm the interim managing director for the Ujima Fund at the Boston Ujima Project. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mrs. Miriam G. Obviously, she is an amazing woman in many facets, but she's widely known as the co-founder of Co.Everything and a brilliant design professional and architect professional, and a member of the Boston Ujima Project as well. So we're really excited to have her. She's also a member of the investment committee. So she's well-versed in many things, and obviously brings great energy and great passion to everything that she does. So without further ado, pleasure to introduce you all to Miriam G.
Thank you, Jock. Thanks everyone for joining. All right, cool. So I also have my co-founder, Declan Keefe, on here as a co-host. So as things progress in the evening, folks will be helping me keep time and stay on track, drop links into the chat, and assist. So a reminder, we are recording this session. Thank you, Sierra. It will be posted on the Boston Ujima Project YouTube channel in the near future. And if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to visit Necessary Systems Real Estate. So that is a continuation of the 2021 Real Estate Assembly called A Loving Embrace. So our event was up here today, and there are real estate investment opportunities available in our new economy here. Okay, cool. So this is what we're up to tonight. We're going to do a little 10-minute presentation on what is crowdfunding. Then we're going to give an example of 1463.ave, which is the first crowd-funded real estate project in Boston, 10 minutes. And then we're going to take 15 minutes to do breakout groups in groups of 3 or 4, where everyone will intro themselves and kind of brainstorm some questions that after I've given those 2 presentations that we may have around crowdfunding, or in particular around the .av example. And then we'll come back together, and I'd ask when we're in those breakout groups for one person to be the reporter to type into the chat some of the questions that your group came up with. And then we'll close it out. That's all, easy peasy. And here we go. So we'll start first with, what is Reg CF? So Reg CF refers to, in 2016, the Jobs Act allowed the public to begin to invest in companies, which was previously available for only accredited investors. We'll do a little explanation of what an accredited investor was. But this is really cool because now that meant that we could do crowdfunding. So we gave some examples of crowdfunding today in the chat and what everybody's been investing in, anywhere from like mutual aid to Kivas and Kickstarters. So in tonight's presentation, when we're talking about Reg CF, I'm going to say peer-to-peer lending, which, for example, Nia gave Kiva as a Kiva example of something that she's participated in that's a crowdfund. So that's peer-to-peer lending, where I'm gonna loan $20 to Jock, and a whole bunch of people are going to loan Jock money, and there's individual loans in between people for small amounts. And that's also a crowdfund, but it's called peer-to-peer lending. So that's not the crowdfund we're talking about today. There's also donations. So for example, I've got folks here who are part of Boston Farms Community Land Trust. We do a bike fundraiser every year in the summer into the fall. And I get friends and family, kind of a crowd of people, to donate to me to do a bike ride. And then those donations go to Boston Farms Community Land Trust. So that's a donation version of crowdfunding, which is not what Reg CF is. And then Kickstarter. I'll give the example that my brother is in a band, 2 bands actually, total band geek. And they ran a Kickstarter campaign where they were getting a whole bunch of friends and family to crowdfund their first CD so that they could record an album. And in exchange, you know, I got a t-shirt and a CD. But I didn't own any equity in, you know, their band. And in each of these instances, there wasn't any equity able to be exchanged. So tonight we're going to talk about equity crowdfunding using Reg CF, which can also actually be debt crowdfunding. But Reg CF is different because it is heavily regulated by the federal government. It uses a security exemption, which has lots of limitations, especially on things like advertising, what you can and cannot say. It always happens on an online platform that has to be pre-approved by the federal government. And then there's a maximum amount of money that can be raised through crowdfunding, which is $5 million per company per year. So this is the public, anyone above the age 18. We'll move on to the next slide because I've already gotten ahead of myself. Let's talk about minimums and maximums. Reg CF requires you to have minimums and maximums when you raise money. So if the way it works is you have to set a target amount. So if you meet or exceed the minimum amount, then the crowdfund investments will be issued according to whatever terms the issuer came up with. So that could be debt or equity, whatever it is. And if you do not meet the minimum raise in the time allocated for the offering, then nothing happens. No one gets to move forward, no one's invested, and the money actually have never really left your account. And then finally, with a maximum limit, as I said, if you get to the maximum limit before the end of the offering expires, then no additional investors can participate. So that's something about it, which, maybe if you were doing donations, there's not really the same requirements of setting a minimum or a maximum goal. Okay, so who can invest in Reg CF crowdfund offerings? I like to say Reg CF is for regular people. So regular people can invest, which are non-accredited investors. And that means anybody who is age 18 or over, who makes less than $200,000 annually or $300,000, including a spouse, with a total net worth of less than $1 million when their primary residence is excluded. So this is anyone in the US and it's not place or state specific. Accredited investors can also invest. So if you've got that big money and you've got that $1 million, you've never been excluded from investing. You can invest all the time, but you can also invest in Reg CF. So that's just to say Reg CF is for regular people. This didn't really exist before. So that's why it's pretty exciting to learn about when we talk about new ways of moving through our economy. Okay, cool. So crowdfunding limits, each regular person, Reg CF non-accredited investor, can invest around $2,200 maximum over the course of 12 months. So like from today backwards 12 months, if I don't calculate any of my income or my net worth, as a maximum, the government says $2,200. The caveat, or 5% of the greater value of either your income or your net worth, excluding your primary residence. So for example, the median income of someone in Dorchester is $55,000 a year. So if that income is 5%, and you make $55,000 as an example, 5% of that in the past 12 months, you could invest in a number of different crowd funds, $2,750. And so that continues to roll on and on. But that's just to say that the government, because this is open to the public, they're saying, well, if somebody, only has a net worth of $5,000, maybe I don't want them investing more than $2,200. So we're going to just set a baseline limitation on it. So that's a fact to know about it. Okay. Next, how does Reg CF potentially apply to real estate? As Jack mentioned, Co.Everything, we focus on architecture, real estate development, and everything else. And the cooperative side of all of those things is definitely our favorite space to work in. So we've been thinking about Reg CF and how it applies to real estate, with the idea that community members could invest either debt or equity in a development project alongside the development team. So this is our cute little drawing of everybody investing together in a building. And so let's talk about maybe how equity would work in that instance. So equity crowdfunding would start with a developer who has an idea for a building. And the developer would then go out and get debt lending, perhaps from a bank. If you want to see the big real estate 101, it's also on the Boston Ujima YouTube channel, but we did it back in November. So if you need a little more real estate 101, that's still out there for you. So there's debt lenders and potentially equity partners. And so after the developer has enough equity and loans from the bank to complete their project, they may decide, we want to see about having some of our neighbors invest in this project because we're radical and inclusive and we're down with that. Or maybe in some instances, the developer may just be thinking, yeah, I need some money and I could help fill the gap by having equity from neighbors in our neighborhood investing in this project as a crowd fund. So then the developer or the issuer would go through a very, very long series of months doing paperwork where they would set up this investment on a crowdfunding portal. And the portal helps you apply and do all of the paperwork and work with accountants, et cetera, to get everything in order to exactly say what the offering is. What are the terms of offering, how long it is, what are the minimums and maximums, what's the minimum amount of investment you're asking from each investor. And then the crowd or the community investors, all the folks that are the public would be able to invest. And so in each investment, there would be a projected return. And so this is a diagrammatic simplification of the crowd fund, but it's just to give you an idea of how it could be applied to a development and real estate, as opposed to, say, Kiva, which is mostly peer-to-peer lending for small businesses, right? So even though this is a company, the company is investing and owning a building. And this building could be a rental building, it could be a commercial building, apartments, it could be any kind of building. Okay, so from the Co.Everything perspective, why would this even be valuable? Why would it be valuable to go through all this trouble to do months and months of paperwork when a developer may say, I just know a really rich person who's going to invest $1 million. I don't need to deal with trying to raise money from all of our neighbors. The cool thing about Reg CF is there are lower investment minimums. So that means it's more accessible to more people. More people, regular people, can invest and participate in real estate. And there's a potential for building assets if we're talking about equity, which could help reduce wealth inequality and reduce the racial wealth gap, frankly. And then it's also a real estate investment opportunity. So like for renters, it might be the first time that you'd have a chance to invest in something. Maybe you're not all the way there to saving up for a big mortgage and a down payment, but it's a way that incrementally we can start to build intergenerational wealth for local families instead of just the few investors who probably already had a lot of money and didn't necessarily need to make an extra return on their money. It's also can be hyper local. The money invested locally is more likely to stay in the neighborhood, which can support affordable and sustainable housing. And like I mentioned before, if home ownership is out of reach, this could be the first entry into owning real estate without the need for a really, really big investment. And I'm talking about like $500 minimums are some of the limits that are available on these platforms. We were also excited about crowdfunding in real estate because we thought there was an opportunity for neighbors to kind of be part of this, like Pop Ed series, and learn a little bit about real estate development and investing in a way that's different than an individual family unit or an individual household pursuing home ownership. It's different, and it kind of changes the way that we think about having ownership in our neighborhoods. And then lastly, for community, it's an opportunity for us to directly and collectively be a part of something. And I think that, you know, as Ujima members, we may all resonate with that. You care about the things that you own together in community. And so we thought this could be a really cool avenue for alternative ownership. All right, so a couple of crowdfunding platforms to check out. We've got 3 up here. So smallchange.co, raisegreen.com, and mainvest.com are all different platforms that if you want to check them out, I'll try to drop them into the chat now, that focus on different crowdfunding aspects. So Small Change focuses on real estate projects, which we'll get to in a minute. And then Raise Green actually focuses on energy infrastructure and solar projects and deep energy retrofit investment. So that's also a crowdfunding platform. And then Mainvest, which maybe people are a little more familiar with, is about investing in brick and mortar businesses. So even though we just talked about how can Reg CF and crowdfunding be useful for people in real estate and talking about collective ownership of real estate, there are these other avenues of using Reg CF to have collective ownership of other kinds of things, or collective investment. You know, it's not necessarily guaranteed that every project that on all of these platforms or every offering is going to be an equity and ownership offering. It could be that it is a debt offering. Cool. So I think I'm doing pretty good on time. Here we are. This is where we've arrived. So what if you could use crowdfunding in real estate to create collective ownership, sidebar, and democratic participation? So this wonderful group of people came together about 2 years ago, local Dorchester neighbors, Co.Everything and T-Lead Development. And we started talking about this idea of how could we use Reg CF, and would we want to do the first crowdfunded real estate in Boston? And why would we do it? And what are the values of potentially doing this in our neighborhood? And after a long time, we kind of crafted as a group the offering terms and the values that we thought it was going to be useful for and who we were going to market this real estate investment to, because where this project ended up, it's not actually on the platform because the project really needs money. It's actually on the platform because this group of community advisors who came together, many of whom are on this call tonight, said that the real value is in creating collective ownership and being a part of something together and offering real estate ownership to neighbors, more so than it is about making a quick buck, which it's not. And then also for the developer to get money, you know, into the project. So that's just to say, here's where we are. And it's taken a while for us to get here. The full disclaimer is, because this is a publicly recorded presentation, there are going to be some times where I may not be able to say things out loud related to this crowdfund, because of the limitations I told you about earlier. So because this is public, anytime there's like a number or a figure specifically around 1463.av and the offering, I'll show it to you on the screen because it's available on Small Change, but I won't be able to like necessarily answer the direct questions out loud. You know, we can always follow up one-on-one, and whatever you say amongst yourselves in the breakout rooms is up to you. So that's the full disclaimer here. So we're going to head over now to 1463.av, and then maybe someone can drop this short link into the chat. I will also try to do it. Whoop. Here we go if you want to follow along. So this project, I'm going to try to do a quick video screen share. Let's see if I can do it. I may need to stop share and try again. I'm going to come back one more time. And here we go, optimize for video clip. So this is the Small Change website, which again, like I said before, is an online investment platform. And I'm just gonna play a 3-minute video to show you about the project. Here we go.
My name's Travis Lee.
I'm Dariella Villon-Maga.
I'm Milton Bramble. T-Lead Development has been in existence for about 7 years, and we launched it in order to create an organization that focused on developing real estate in the Dorchester community.
We develop income-restricted housing in the Dorchester area. A lot of our housing also has commercial space.
We have a great support system behind us from the neighborhoods.
T-Lead Development has a lot of community ties and ensures that the community's voice is heard throughout the project. 1463.av consists of 29 workforce units.
Around 1,300 to 1,400 square feet of commercial retail.
The 5,000 square foot lot sits directly adjacent to the MBTA Red Line.
Legitimately, I can almost touch the train right now, and we're on the site.
The project does not include any off-street parking. That is not an accidental thing. We believe that because of the proximity to jobs and services, public transit, And the smaller unit sizes, the studios and one bedrooms, where we don't have large families living here with multiple children, that cars are not going to be of high need.
They can get right on the train and get to work.
This project sits in the heart of the Fields Corner Commercial District, and residents can walk across the street to several restaurants. There are banks, there's job opportunities, and there are parks down the street, shopping center for groceries, all within walking distance.
Site turned out to be a wonderful site for the project.
The workforce housing aspect is special because the program is specifically aimed for folks that are working and don't make enough to qualify for subsidized housing, but don't necessarily make enough to pay for market rent on their own.
Teely Development has been involved with a variety of projects in Fields Corner, and we believe that place matters. Focusing on a very specific community allows us to have a greater impact.
We thought that with this project, it will start to give an insight on what it is to become a part of developing your neighborhood and being able to stay in your neighborhood and being able to afford in your neighborhood.
The crowdfunding initiative is one way that we keep the community involved in all the projects that we build.
This very small step towards creating a more inclusive and equitable real estate development process.
We would like people in the community to be a part of this project. So we're inviting community stakeholders to own a part of the project in Dorchester here with us.
All right, so let me see if I can get out of that. So we're going to have to move through this a little bit quickly so that we can get to questions. About this page, there are 166 pages of information in here, right here on this link. If you click here to download the disclosure packet, this is the ultimate legalese if you're interested in investing in the project. If you want to look at a prettier version that's maybe easier to digest, a lot of that information is all available on this website with hyperlinks. And everything has kind of a drop-down menu. So everywhere from like, who are the lending partners? What is the timeline for the project? More about the project, info about the market. It also has about the finances, you know, about the return, about the risk, about the team, Travis, Dariella, and Milton at Teely Development, who I think are on the call, about the neighborhood. Again, this is the portion that's about the offering, and then key deal points, which I'll come back to this in just a minute. I want to talk about a bit about the democratic participation aspect that we've thrown into the mix here. So also for all small change projects, they have this kind of sidebar up on the top right, where it tells you the total amount that's been raised to date so far, and that it's open to everyone because this is a Reg CF. Other people do different types of offerings on here, but this project's doing just a crowdfund. So this is the minimum goal amount and how much percentage of it has been raised so far. And then the maximum goal, how many investors have come into this project so far and invested, and how many days there are left to invest. So we're kind of coming up on the finish line here. So if you ever have any questions about kind of the status, this is the status of where the investment is going. And like I said before, because this project, if it hits the minimum goal, everything goes through. If it didn't hit the minimum goal, then it wouldn't go through. And then there are the offering highlights. Again, I cannot say these terms out loud, so I'm just going to highlight them for you here. But it shows you the return on investment on the page. And this is in the instance that I may accidentally say the wrong number. That's why I'm not supposed to say them. And then if there is a bonus, and if there is a portion of any of the investment being returned, the type of investment, is this equity or debt? How long is the investment? Is it short, medium, or long term? When the date that the offering closes, and then the last chance you have to cancel. So even if you did decide to invest, you have up until March, sorry, I can't say that number. You have up until 2 days before the final closing to cancel your investment. So all of those things are there on the website. And I'm gonna move forward with the discussion around participatory democratic decision-making, which is not a part of all small change projects. So we'll come back to this more because I'm going to give some time in the breakouts for folks to raise questions, which I'm sure there will be a lot of. So how could Reg CF be used in a way that's not just about the collective financial ownership of something like real estate development in your neighborhood, but also about an alternative way of thinking about governance? And so in this offering, the project has created an oversight committee. And if you're familiar with participating in Ujima and voting and making decisions on how the Ujima fund is distributed, you might see a little bit of a parallel here in what's been created. So committee members are invited to participate in some decisions such as rent increases, though much of that is actually limited because it's an income restricted workforce housing project. The selection of who the commercial tenant may be, anything from like participating in annual investor meetings or deciding, like who's going to be the property management company that we might use. So community investors, if you invest in this project, you can be elected into the project oversight committee. And then you can participate in some decisions related to the property along with TLE development. So you're going to join this committee as an investor. The decision making, each investor is allowed a single vote to elect someone to the project oversight committee as representatives. And again, here's some ideas of things that we think would be decisions made by the project committee. How to use the common space, constraints around selecting a property manager, etc. So it's not like it's super exciting stuff, but this is real estate property management. Kind of in the beginning, we think that there would be a lot of people, a lot of participation and decisions to be made, and then annually it's probably less. So in this process, there's an election every 2 years, and then any investor can run for a position on the committee, and there will be 6 elected committee members. And some of these members, as of right now, we don't actually have residents because the project is under construction. But in the future, residents may actually also be investors. It's done by lottery as it is an income restricted project. So the responsibility is investors, crowdfund investors will be updated annually about the finances, and then committee members will meet twice a year or as needed. And they will also review the financial performance of the previous year and make any necessary decisions. So here we are. We've arrived at the questions and comments section of our show tonight. And I'm going to give us 10 minutes in breakout groups. We're going to try to do 3 or 4 people. And please introduce yourself and come up with one question as a group that you may have either about crowdfunding or the 1463.av project. Please remember to have one person from your group write down your response on a piece of paper or text it to yourself or whatever. And then when we come back together as a group, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can all the way through the end. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Thank you all for introducing yourselves to each other and hopefully sharing a little bit of your curiosities and insights about crowdfunding. If you've got a minute, I would ask that the scribe or volunteer recorder for each group type into the chat their group's question, which I know there must be a lot of them because I just gave only like 5 minutes on that 1463.av project, the first crowdfund in Boston. So give it a go, folks. I'd also like to tell you that if we don't get to answering all the questions in the next 14 minutes, we are happy to follow up with you via email. Declan will drop our emails into the chat, or you can email Sierra and we'll get back to you with any questions you may have specifically around crowdfunding. Maybe you've got some big visions for the future in your neighborhood. And also on the Small Change website, if you have questions specifically about 1463.av, you can actually log in and ask your question there and the development team will respond directly. Part of that is about accessibility to information. Since it's a public offering, they want everybody to have access to all the questions and answers about the project so nobody has any like inside information or misinformation. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna start. Ooh, y'all are good. Okay, Camila, If you're building something next to the train station, how would your building be affected by that? Okay, so first question about that, that's about 1463.Ave being right on the Fields Corner train station. There were a lot of MBTA regulations applied to the project about distances from things and buffers and so forth. And I can also say that this building has been designed with a passive house building envelope, which is super insulated and very, very airtight, which is actually also a really good way to buffer sound. So that's one consideration, but it's also, because it's so close, it was one of the exceptions of why the city of Boston allowed this project to go through without any parking. Okay, and then how do you get people to invest? What were your tactics? I think I can answer that. So as a group, we started out with kind of a small core group of like 4 or 5 people. And then with the community advisors group, that grew to about 10 people. And since this is actually a publicly available investment, any of those projects that I showed you on Small Change, May Invest, or Raised Green, anyone in the US over 18 could invest. But it's not like people are hanging out on the internet just trying to invest in crowd funds every day. So really it is about who do you market to? And we tried to focus it mostly on Black, Brown, and folks of color or residents and neighbors in Dorchester. So it was really about using our own networks to kind of expand out, like start with a small group, get to a larger group, those group tell a few people, and then make sure that we're reaching out to partners who were kind of values aligned with us, because this wasn't about the money and it was more about the people. That's kind of how we started doing our outreach and have been really successful so far. Okay, and then Camila, how do you decide to take on a project? How do you sustain yourselves? Have you thought about reparations within the context of Black and Indigenous history in Boston? Well, as far as Co.Everything goes, we're not the developer on this project. So how we decide to take on a project, this is the first time we've taken on a consulting gig doing a Reg CF. It came about with the idea of like, no one's ever tried this before, and can this be a more equitable way to address some of the inequalities that exist around race and class? And so that was one idea, and it wasn't exactly about reparations, but I can say that that was some of the context that informed how, like I said, how we marketed and who we reached out to that we wanted to offer this to. So I think, thanks Camila, I think I got those from your group. Okay, so for Anisha, what is their democratic process? And then 2, comps, has this been done before and what were the outcomes? And then 3, what's the outreach to spread the word about this project? Social media, institutional partnerships, physical advertising. Oh, wow, a lot in there. Okay, I'm gonna start with the top one, Anisha. So the democratic process, like I said, is about this elected board with the project oversight committee. Crowd funds in general don't have any recommendation or requirement around that. However you structure your offering, if you're going to do a crowd fund, is up to you. And so we went with a representative democratic decision-making process. I don't know if it's been outlined whether it's consensus or voting. I can't recall, but I can get back to you about that. I think the intent is to have investors, so community investors, residents who are part of the building, and then also, you know, TLE development. And that group of people, that project oversight committee, is the one making those decisions. Comps, has this been done before and what were the outcomes? As far as a crowdfunding, this is the first one in Boston. So a crowdfund in Boston doesn't have comps like this, but for real estate, this type of real estate development in Boston, yes, TLE development has hundreds of units kind of like in this income restricted workforce housing category. And a lot of them are transit-oriented development, and the majority of them are rental units and held for some affordability. So those have been some of the outcomes. There is a pretty detailed project pro forma and a budget that everybody can look at if you like start clicking on all the links about the offering and about the finances. Okay, rapid fire. Okay, what's the outreach to spread the word? Sierra has done a social media post through Ujima. Co.Everything has done social media posts, and mostly the posts are just like 1463.Ave is having a crowdfund, and then has a hyperlink to it, the bit.ly link, because part of the advertising is you can't really say anything about the terms. So all that we're saying is like, there it is. And then we've been doing a lot of kind of like workshops like this, talking about crowdfunding. There are banners on the job site. So if you've been by Fields Corner recently, you'll see a nice banner and it has a QR code that will take you to the Small Change website. Everything's just like all the advertising rules say, like funnel people towards the website where there's 166 pages of information. Okay, so where do crowdfund investors lie on the capital stack? So I'm not going to be able to answer that one. It is outlined in about the offering. And I will say that it's different for every offering. So in however you do the crowdfund, if you're issuing it, it'll be up to you where you put the crowdfund investors in the capital stack. And then potential liability regarding the project. I can answer this one as a blanket statement from Small Change. So the risk advertisement for Small Change is anyone investing in a crowdfund should be ready to lose their entire investment. That's their blanket statement about risk. Real estate is not a guarantee, and investing in a real estate crowdfund is not a guarantee of returns. All of the returns are projected. So that's the blanket statement around crowdfunding. It doesn't mean that there's additional risk beyond losing that money, but they are making that statement like, if you're going to invest $2,200, you need to be ready to potentially lose that investment. It is at risk. Okay. And so, Angela, can a community fully own a property together per the regulation, or does traditional funding need to be part of the mix? I would say, hypothetically, a community could fully own a property per the regulation. There isn't a limit to how you structure that offering. And so I think it would mostly be about, would you be able to get enough money, really? Or is there going to be some traditional funding that needs to be a part of the mix? I don't know, maybe if you worked with like the community land trust and they're willing to get the price of the building down to like a much smaller amount, then the whole community could own it. Good question, thanks. Myrna, what metrics are used to create affordability and subsidize rent? Why this project first? Okay, so about 1463.av, the metric used to create affordability is through mass housing. They have a workforce development fund that is essentially a fund where they loan money equivalent, like a certain amount of money, I can't remember, per unit. So if there's 20 something units, they're going to lend 20 something units times, I don't know, 100,000. I can't exactly remember the number. And that's essentially the subsidy. It comes in the terms of a forgivable loan that is renewed every 15 years, where I believe you don't have to repay the principal, but you do have to pay interest on that loan. And that's available. A lot of workforce housing projects use mass housing. It's a public-private kind of like lending entity. And so that's where it comes from. It's not a low-income housing tax credit. It is a different type of subsidy. And so with that, comes this, I can't remember, 30 years, 50 years, or however many years of affordability that's locked into income restriction, and how much, raising by the cost of inflation every year for the rent and those types of limits. Yes, you can find out more in the About the Finances link on the Small Change website. Cool. And then why this project first? I don't know that this project specifically was like the best ever to do for crowdfunds. I would say that Tealy Development and Co.Everything has been talking about doing something like this for a long time. And it just like kind of, we gained enough momentum that we were like, okay, yeah, let's try this. And so we went for kind of like the project that seemed like it didn't really need the money immediately, and it was going to be stable anyway. And then however many people we brought in from community are just buying out a different piece of the pie. And so that's, I think, really why we started with this one. I can't officially say, but in hypothesis, I think Co.Everything would like to see a lot more real estate crowdfunding in the future with as many people as possible. So we're happy that it's happening in Dorchester and Fields Corner, and it has like a really good rooting in community and like lots of community contacts with all the neighborhood and civic associations. We've done a lot of presentations about this offering, like 5 minutes, with a lot of the neighborhood associations in Fields Corner and all around Dorchester. Cool. Okay. One or two more. Okay, Sierra, how will the development team achieve returns given that it is an affordable housing project? Okay, so that one, I will speak to this in the abstract, because you can look at the financing, which gives you the exact cash flow of like year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, on and on and on, which kind of explains it. But it's essentially, I will say that the way that any development project is going to get bank financing is you have to prove to the bank that you can make a project that makes money, right? A bank is not going to lend money to a developer to build a project if the net cash flow over time won't be able to pay the bank out, right? So in a way, even though the subsidy is there, where there's this chunk of money that's being paid, that doesn't have to be repaid by mass housing, which is kind of helping so that people don't have to pay full rent, market rate rent. There is still enough room in there that over time, eventually, as the loans get paid down for workforce housing projects, you have less and less money to pay every year. But if the rents are stabilized, eventually you're making enough money to then, make money on the project. So that's the general statement. Okay, 2 more minutes. I think we're done with questions. And I think Sierra dropped the email in the chat. I will also drop mine in the chat right now. I'm sorry, folks, that we didn't get to all of them, but it's all available there online, and the minimum investment amount is there, and you can ask as many questions as you want by logging in. It's completely open to the public, and we will answer the questions there. And you're welcome to follow up with me at any time. So thank you very much, everyone. And if you have any other ideas about crowdfunding, of course, call up Co.Everything. We'd love to do more. So let's do it in our neighborhoods. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Miriam. This is so great.
I know there were so many questions that we didn't get to, but it's okay. I'll send
all
you.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. I'll send you the recording. I recorded it to my desktop because my cloud is too full, and I'll just cut out the chunk. Well, I'll cut out this chunk in the end, but I'll cut out the chunk in the middle where we were in breakout groups because
okay, so that's so great. I usually have to do that. I thank you many times.
Thank you so much for setting up the Eventbrite. It was really cool, and for doing all of the outreach that you did, and for making all the short links, and just like being amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I want to talk to you more about this whole architecture thing. I'm like, that's cool.
I'm sorry. Can I jump in real quick? Can you all just clarify the time, the deadline? I put a question in the chat. It says midnight.